It is my joy and honor to introduce our guest speaker today. Wanda Lee is a native of Russellville, Alabama. She graduated from the I.V. Moffitt School of Nursing with a Bachelor of Science degree, which school is now part of Samford University. She then has received an honorary doctor's degree in public administration from Campbellsville University. Wanda is a registered nurse, having nursed in Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia. She is a missionary. She has served as an international missionary along with her husband Larry in St. Vincent on the Windward Islands. She has served in the Women's Missionary Union on the local church level, the associational level, the state convention level, and the national level. And for nearly 17 years, she has served as the executive director of the Women's Missionary Union convention-wide. In addition to that, she is a wife and mother. Her husband, Larry, is here with us today. He's also a former missionary and pastor, and they together have two grown children, a son and a daughter, and two very young grandsons. So would you join with me in welcoming Wanda Lee?
It's a privilege to be with you today, and I thank Dr. Gates and the church for inviting me. I had a wonderful time with your women yesterday at a luncheon, and appreciate Martha Tidwell setting all that up for me. This is a very special week in the life of Southern Baptist churches all around our country. It's the week of prayer for international missions and the Lottie Moon Christmas offering, which focuses our attention on the needs of the world while we reflect on this wonderful gift of Jesus given to us that first Christmas so long ago. It's one of those traditions that Baptist churches should never lose. Now, I'm a believer in traditions, and so speaking of traditions, I know that you must have some Christmas traditions of your own. I think every family has something where they would say, it's just not Christmas until we do this. So what is that? Can you fill in the blank in your own mind? For some, it's the first singing of the Christmas carol. You know Christmas has arrived because you're singing Christmas carols at church. For children, it may be they don't feel like it's Christmas till they go to the grandparents' house. We have to bake cookies at our house. 2 little boys. The place is a mess when they're done. But it's not Christmas until they come. For many people, it's when they put up the tree. Now, I remember the very first time we celebrated Christmas as a missionary family in St. Vincent, in a place that was very far from home. Living on an island, you can imagine, created quite a dilemma when it comes to finding the traditional American Christmas tree. I remember our neighbor coming over one day and saying in his Portuguese language that I didn't understand very well, very broken English, that he knew about the American tradition of a Christmas tree. He had one on his farm, and he would bring it to my house. No worries. The children would have a Christmas tree. He was so proud that day when he drove up in our driveway, and there was that Christmas tree. Yes, it was A-shaped, like American Christmas trees. There was just one problem. It was a wild cherry tree. It had very few leaves on it. It had lots of thorns. And I remember trying to hide my dismay, thinking about the little fingers that I would have to keep away from the thorns on that tree. But you know, there was a good point about it. My preschoolers learned that there were lots of places to hang an ornament. It wasn't difficult to keep the ornaments on the tree that year. And so at Christmas, our very first one in St. Vincent, stood this wild cherry tree with handmade ornaments on it. Ornaments that were made during our first year of marriage out of the beads of costume jewelry of mothers that we had lost in our teenage years. It was our tradition, not the tree, but the ornaments. So for us, it's not Christmas now 45 years later until we drag out that box, and there are those ornaments now quite tattered and worn, but we pull them out and we put them on a tree. In St. Vincent, we merged our family tradition with a new tradition of that wild cherry tree, and it made for a very special Christmas in the life of our family. Churches have traditions as well. You have your traditions, your church has it. Many churches have the hanging of the green. It's not Christmas till the decorations come out. Well, one of those celebrations that I think is an important tradition is the Lottie Moon Christmas offering and the Week of Prayer for International Missions. It's a very important part of Baptist church traditions that take place during Christmas. The way we do missions has changed over time. The places where we send missionaries has changed over time. But the one thing that has never changed, the one thing that has united us as Southern Baptists, has been the purpose of this very week, and that is missions. It is that time when we join together, we pool our resources, we pool our praying and our concern, and we enhance our knowledge of what's happening around the world, and we support those who go in a way that keeps them on the field while they tell the Christmas story, the story of Jesus to many who have never heard. I have a special book in my office. It's a quite heavy, thick book called Send the Light. It's a collection of letters that Lottie Moon wrote, that early missionary to China. And in her letter, she speaks of the need of continuing the partnership that Southern Baptists started in the 1800s even with missionaries in her day. One of my favorite letters, I made a copy of it to bring this morning. Lottie actually wrote this letter in 1887. She was trying to convince Southern Baptists to do more in their support of women who should get on board with missions. The Southern Baptist Convention at that point had not placed a very high priority on supporting missions, and they weren't quite as focused on that being that uniting front for Southern Baptist work. And so Lottie wanted to challenge them, and she wanted to say the women should be the ones who got the motion going for greater support of missions. And so I want to read you, it's a very long letter. I just want to read one little paragraph that I think speaks to this issue. She said, now these are Lottie's words, "I am convinced that one of the chief reasons our Southern Baptist women do so little is the lack of organization. Why should we not learn from these noble Methodist women and instead of the paltry offerings we take, do something that will prove we really are in earnest in claiming to be followers of him who, as she said, though he was rich, for our sake became poor." How do these Methodist women raise so much money, she said? By prayer and self-denial. Ouch. Southern Baptist women did not like being compared to the Methodist women, and they knew they could do something to make a difference. And so that next year, in 1888, with the words of Lottie ringing in their hearts, they joined together and created what is called Woman's Missionary Union. It had one purpose. It was to unite the churches in support of missions through giving and praying. They set two goals in that first year. Remember, this is 1888, before the women had the right to vote, before they were allowed to have professional careers. This was something so strange for women in the 1800s to undertake. But they set a goal of sending 2 Bible women to China to help Lottie Moon because she had made such a plea for help. And they had heard that a church was needed in Cuba, a physical building where Christians could meet. And so they committed to raise the money and pray for those things. And when all was said and done, enough money had been given to send 3 Bible women to China and fully build the church in Cuba and set aside a reserve to help educate the Cuban pastors. Wow. It became the central focus of what we do in a Baptist tradition. Later, again, with the prodding of Lottie Moon, and because she said they do it with prayer and self-denial, the first week of prayer was actually established by WMU. It's a time to share missionary stories, and I noticed in your bulletin today, you have the prayer guide. WMU works with IMB to create the prayer guide where we select 7 missionary stories to share during the week of prayer. We list their special prayer requests as a way of helping us focus our attention on the needs of the world. Even later, over 100 years ago, It was thought an organized system for praying would help us do a better job of praying for our missionaries every day if we had a prompting. And so the prayer calendar was created. And to this very day, I have my Missions Mosaic magazine with me. And if you look in the back of Missions Mosaic, you will find the prayer calendar, just as it's been for over 100 years. Oh, it looks a little different, and some of the names are just initials now because of the secret place that many are serving. But it continues to serve as a reminder that we have a part, just as David Platt said in the video. We have a part. Our part is to pray and give and listen when God is calling us. And so here we are, generations long past Lottie Moon's day, with a tradition that has stood the test of time. We're here today to pray, and in the days ahead we'll be called to give, so that those whom God has called can go and work and share the Christmas story with those who have never heard. In recent days, we've been saddened by the call of missionaries to come home because there was a lack of funds. Can you imagine the adjustment of missionaries who've spent 20, 25 years overseas, and they've come home now and they're wondering, how will I find a job? Where am I going to live? Is there going to be a car that I can even drive? And will I still know how to drive in America? Many of them are returning home at early age in the 50s. They have to work until Social Security comes in. And so can you imagine at age, say, 59, you're out trying to find a job? That's very difficult. And so there are things we can do tangibly here at home during this season to help our missionaries. We can provide the support they need. Maybe it's just a listening ear. Maybe they need a place to live. Maybe they need somebody to give them a reference for a job and explain why they're not very familiar with American culture right now. There are many things we can do, but I think there are many things that they can do for us. For you see, they're coming home knowing the heart language of all of those who have immigrated into our country. They're coming to our country knowing the culture and knowing how to relate to people who are different than you and me. And so if we can help plug them in, if we can give them a place of support, they can help reach our own communities and show us how to reach those who've yet to hear the story of missions and of Jesus. It was Annie Armstrong, the first leader for WMU, in her final address to the WMU members, when she said, after the study of God's word comes the study of the fields, then people pray, then they give. Missions discipleship begins with knowing God's heart for the nations of the world. When we open our minds, knowing and loving the people of the world, we will pray more specifically for their needs. And out of our praying will come a conviction to give generously out of the blessings that you and I have received. So in the midst of knowing, praying, giving, we are also able to hear when God calls us to go. It is a process that God does in our heart. But can you imagine what he could do with a family or a church that was completely in sync with his will for reaching a lost world? So let me ask you again, what are your Christmas traditions? Very often, those Christmas traditions unite us as a family. They bring joy and memories that we build on. And our church traditions should do the same. They should unite us and help us build that purpose that God so desires for our churches. And that purpose is to lead us to faith. It is to help bring others to faith. And it is to lead us to understand and love the people of the world as he does, so that they might know the Savior that you and I know. It's a wonderful season of the year filled with many traditions. And I pray that the Lord will bless you as you celebrate and as you learn and hear God's call to resound his message around the world. Thank you.